Great day, everyone, and welcome to King Connections presents the connecting series on how you can bring about systematic adaptive change in your life. And so our connecting with intent formula is really predicated on connections plus strategies plus systems plus value equals social capital. First, social, then financial capital. And what I've learned through my years as a connector, as a system engineer, and as a real estate developer, and in many other different hats that I've worn, is that the heart of building any successful business is relationships. And if you don't know how to build relationships, you're not going to be very successful sustainably for years and scalability as far as growing your business. And what I want to do is put together a series of webinars for some of my great connections that I have with my network and in my life, folks who I feel are very influential, definitely who are making a positive difference, who I've learned from, who I believe that you all can learn from as well. So I asked a gentleman today to join me on this particular webinar because what I realized, him and I did a webinar before, not a webinar, a podcast on this particular topic that we do every Wednesday around immunity to change. And I thought that was so interesting. He also wrote about it in his book. And when I learned what was really been outlined in immunity to change, the difference between adaptive and technical change, I thought was something that everyone needs to hear who really wants to make a positive, intentional, and growth-minded change in their lives. So without any further ado, I want to welcome you all to Reggie Marra. How you doing today, Reggie?
I'm doing well, King. Always great to talk to you. So I'm happy to be here.
I'm glad that you're here as well. And like I said, you're dealing with a topic that I think most people are really not familiar with. Like everyone really wants to change, and most people can't create instant change in their life. And this is not necessarily instant change, but I believe it's definitely something that can put people on the pathway. And as a system engineer, I'm always thinking, what's the process to get started? What's step one? And I think that what you're talking about, what you're going to cover today, can definitely be something that helps people get step one together. And then we're going to talk about how people can get and communicate with you and what we're going to offer folks who really want to be a part of this movement that we're building. But before we get into any of that, I want folks to get a better understanding of who you are as an individual and really learn from the fact that you not only bring a competence and understanding around how to go about the immunity change program, but more importantly, the work that you do around being in the work that you're doing with Fully Human and how you see your life as a servant leader. That's what I call you, and a spiritual capitalist as well. So why don't you give our listening audience an opportunity to learn a little more about you from your words and what you found relevant, what you think relevant to share about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so just briefly going way back, second generation Italian American out of the greater New York City area. My first work out of college was a high school teacher and basketball coach. I actually coached in a New York City Catholic high school league for 13 years and taught in school as well. And then spent about 7 years as a college administrator and occasional adjunct in the English department. Then I set out on my own because there was a larger curriculum that I wanted to dive into, and I didn't know how to do that. So I've been a teaching poet. I've been going into schools and taught teachers and students how to engage poetry. And what I learned in that experience, which feeds what we're talking about, is that most of them told me they understood themselves better through writing their own poetry. So that was a hint about where I was going. Fast forward, I went out to Utah and sat in the Canyonlands with no food for 4 days back in the 1990s with a guy by the name of Bill Plotkin, who continues to be a wonderful teacher today. And then in 2009, I got serious about coaching, and I trained for 2 years with an organization called Integral Coaching Canada. It's up in Ottawa, which I found to be, if it wasn't the most rigorous coaching training out there, it was one of them. It was perfect for me. And I also write, as you mentioned, I have a new book out called Healing America's Narratives, where you and I really met around that book. And what we'll be talking about today is, it's Robert Keegan's process called Immunity to Change. He developed it with his colleague, Lisa Lahey. And it's one of the most direct routes I know to really getting a sense of what I want, what's holding me back, what do I need to learn about myself, in order to make adaptive as opposed to just technical change. And you and I will get into the nuts and bolts of what we mean by that language. So anything else I should share? I think that was enough.
Well, yes, one thing I would like you to share is, now you and I do a weekly podcast on building or becoming fully human, connecting to yourself and understanding what it means to become fully human. And what I want you to share quickly, because you mentioned Bill Plotkin, I just kind of wanted, what influence did he help put you on that path, or did he help you get on that path of discovering that you want to become more fully human than what you were, and continue that growth process?
Yeah, thank you for that question too. I left out the thing that I'm actually doing with my partner Kent, my business partner Kent, because we have a program called Fully Human at Work. So thank you for pointing to the thing I forgot. So yeah, so what Bill did for me was he takes what he calls a soul-centric view of things. That's a great reduction of what he does. You can find out more about him at Animas Valley Institute. But he helped me get more in contact with, what I was on this planet to do. Not just, what's the ideal industry or job, which that's not unimportant. But he goes deeper than that. In other words, what's he calls it your unique ecological niche. Where do I belong in the larger ecology of my local community, but of the planet itself? As a human being, where do I belong? And so he just gave me language and insights into what he calls a soul-centric way of being in the world. That I would argue that the Western approach provides us with an ego-centric view of the world, and it just really gave me tools and language and shifted how I was approaching what it was I was trying to do. And so the more I come in contact with not just what I learn in school, in the training I have on the job, or what I learn as an entrepreneur, but to really expand it out to become more fully human by connecting with my soul work, as opposed to just what Bill calls survival work, and that's not a derogatory term. It just means what I do to make money so I can eat and have a roof and the other things that we need. So the idea of having a soul work or soul path is very different from getting a good job with benefits.
I like that, connecting with your soul. I think that's so important.
Yeah.
And I hope you all realize the benefit of where I'm going with this, because what I want people to realize is that, again, I refer to myself as a system engineer because as an engineer, we're taught to always get at the root of the problem by understanding all the elements and components of a system. Now we look at the human being as a system, and I like to say a system of behaviors. Because in my research, in my studying, here's what I realized is that the reason I'm putting together this program is to help people understand that whether we want to accept it or not, we're part of the systems that our government and society creates for us. And I tell people that when you have systems that you're a part of, whether you intentionally choose to be a part of or not, what the systems are designed to do in this case is really create your own, or force you into your own tribe. I call them forcible tribalism. And you're forced into these tribes based on your skin color, based on your race, based on your gender, based on your sexual orientation, based on your politics, and then based on your ethnicity. And also it can even go even further. It could be tribes based off your zip codes, based off the education level, based on your income. And these tribes define how people behave. And when you are put into these tribes, you don't realize that when you're in that tribe, you're behaving within that tribe. And that's why a lot of people can't begin to navigate out. And I think a lot of people confuse tribes with networks. So they use those as synonyms. And my own personal way of defining it is this, or distinguishing it is this, is that tribes are based off the systems that control your behavior, and where networks, you create yourself. And most business professionals teach you how to navigate and create and leverage networks. But the tribes that control, and networks pretty much are things you need in your life, but the tribes are what you are part of until you intentionally, like I like to say, connect with intent to create your own tribe. Now, kind of with that being said, what I want to talk about today and what I really want to focus on is this concept of immunity change. And I want to start by talking about how immunity change can be used as a way of creating adaptive change in your life, particularly in the systems that impact your underlying belief, your values, and your assumptions. So with that being said, why don't you kind of talk about what is immunity change and to give people an overview of what we're talking about in that context?
Yeah, so it's a process that was developed again by Dr. Robert Keegan at Harvard University and his colleague Dr. Lisa Lahey. And it's I find it to be a deceptively simple process that is especially effective when you're trying to change something in your life and you've tried and maybe had a little bit of success, but then fallen back to where you were before. I mean, a really simple example is with weight loss, and this is not a weight loss program. It's looking at your whole ability to see what's really at the core of your inability to change. But we want to lose some weight. We maybe reduce our calories, we increase our exercise, we lose weight for a while, and then we fall off that and we gain the weight back. And what immunity to change would do in that case is would take a real clear look at what we do and how we think and how we feel and what we feel that gets in the way of sustaining the change. In other words, there's something there. If you can lose the weight, and again, we're just using weight loss as an example here. If you can lose the weight, but then you go back to where you were, there's something in your behavior, and it's related to maybe some fear or worry that you have, and it's related to some assumptions that you have. And immunity to change helps you identify your goal, identify the obstacles that you're putting in the way of your goal, identify what you might be afraid of that's helping you create these obstacles, and then looking for underlying assumptions. And the underlying assumptions tend to be where the problem begins. So that's a real quick overview of it. Does it make sense to just tease apart technical change and adaptive change at this point?
Well, yes, but before you do,
yeah.
I just kind of want to make a brief comment about that. That what I believe that when most people who want to change and what they focus on is changing things technically. Now, I do want you to kind of talk about the difference so folks can really understand that, because I think this is key. And I think that this, to me, is really where I would say when you expose me to community change concept or ideology in your book, Healing American Narratives, and then we discussed on the podcast, I was like, oh, wow, technical versus adaptive. And I hadn't realized that what I was doing or had done was based on a previous business model purely on technical change, and thought that because I understood logically and systematically what people would do in their lives and what they want in their lives, I didn't have a clue about how to really bring forth adaptive change. And now I understand the difference. And now my new program does focus on adaptive change. So now with that kind of context set, that I want people to realize that this program that we're advocating and we're teaching within the Connecting with Intent program model is focused on adaptive change. So now, yes, please talk about the difference between technical and adaptive change.
Yeah, so the best example that I like to use to show the difference, I use a surgeon as an example. And this is not a criticism of surgeons. I have titanium and ceramic hips. I had my hips replaced almost 20 years ago, and thank God for the surgeon that did that. And I can tell other stories of some family members whose lives were lengthened by modern medicine. So, but it's, surgeons by definition, they're smart. They have great eye-to-hand coordination. They're courageous. They can be a little bit arrogant at times, which I want my surgeon to be arrogant and confident. I don't want him to be not unsure. But for a surgeon, developing a new way to do a surgery would be an example of technical change. The surgeon himself or herself is the same human being, just has created maybe a more efficient or more effective or a less expensive way to do a surgery. That's an example of technical change. The surgeon develops it. He or she is brilliant and effective, but still sees the patients as people coming with something wrong that needs to be fixed, and still sees him or herself as a surgeon as a really important, successful person who can help resolve the issue. Right? But the surgeon doesn't really change even if he invents a brand new procedure. Fast forward now, let's take the same surgeon who gets sick or injured and has to go into the hospital from the other side of the operating room, let's say, as a patient. Never done this before. And suddenly he or she is lying on their back, and some other surgeon is going to, put them under and perform surgery on them. So there's a little bit of trepidation when you're the patient. You're going to be anesthetized, and they're going to cut part of you open, and that's not a fun thing to think about. So now this surgeon, through this experience, comes out of the surgery, which is successful. But now he or she has a view of medicine and of surgery that includes a firsthand experience of a patient's perspective. So the next time this surgeon deals with a patient, not only does the surgeon have the technical skills that he or she already had in this new procedure that he or she developed, but now he or she is more fully human because she better understands what the patient is going through. Right? That's an adaptive change. The surgeon now looks at his or her practice and the patients through a completely different lens, which allows for more empathy and compassion for the patient, simply because the surgeon knows exactly what it feels like now to be a patient. Now, we're not saying, this is just an example, we're not saying that without that experience, no surgeon is empathic or compassionate. I'm not saying that. But that would be an example of adaptive change, coming out of the surgery with a different view and a different approach to dealing with patients. This surgeon could develop 15 more brilliant, internationally renowned procedures. All of those, as complex as they may be, are only examples of technical change. They have nothing to do with the adaptiveness of the human being.
So what I'm hearing from that, an adaptive change, it sounds like there's also emotional intelligence that's brought into the play, because you're being allows that, in your example of the surgeon, he's more empathetic now to what his patient is going through because he himself have gone through the experience. Would you say now, as a coach, that can you help your clients bring about adaptive change if you have not gone through their an experience similar to what they've gone through?
Yeah, great. Thank you for that question. Great question. So I'm going to just back up slightly with a little bit of very basic developmental theory. In fact, it's Robert Keegan's model of development. Keegan basically says that development is real when we're able to look at what we used to look through. So the lens I'm looking through is how I see the world. When I can recognize that that's a lens, it's not how the world is, it's just the one I'm looking through, and I can see that lens, I've developed in an adaptive way. So for your example with emotional intelligence, I would say it's not always an emotional intelligence move, but it's always a perspective move. So I have a broader or deeper, or both broader and deeper perspective, which might include emotional intelligence. Doesn't necessarily have to, but it might include that. But being able to look at what you used to look through. An example that I learned years ago, and it was a real human being who was a white supremacist, just to use that as an example. And it was an example provided by the work at the Southern Poverty Law Center. I won't give his whole background, but he was a white supremacist. And one day he heard his 4-year-old son say something that was racist. And he realized that his son was going to have the same kind of life he had. He didn't want that for his son. He was a violent guy. He did all kinds of terrible things. And he was ripe for change for some reason. But in that moment, he was able to look at his racism when he used to just look through racism. And he went on to work with the FBI, local law enforcement, and other people who were working against racism in terms of sharing how the white supremacist groups work. And that's a real story. I forget his name. That's a major adaptive change. I mean, not everything that changes is that severe, but that was a story that I learned of probably in the late 80s, early 90s. I was, really moved by it. But that's an example of, wow, now I can see racism when I used to look through racism.
That seeing and then looking through, I think, is definitely critical. And I think that's where, if you can begin to understand just that you are seeing and looking and not necessarily looking through, is something that I believe that the consciousness, the awareness has to be there for an individual to even understand what behaviors they are making that's caused them to be where they are causing them not to be where they want to be.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Now, with that being said,
I didn't answer your question. So do I so let me go, because that was the example for the. So
I'm sorry.
No. I want to make sure I answer the question you asked, so people don't think I was, trying to make believe. I just kind of cut bait and switched you. So you said, do I as a coach have to have had the same experience as my client in order to really feel empathy for them and understand where they are? And the answer is no, because my expertise and any good coach's expertise, especially a developmental coach who works on adaptive change, my understanding is human development. So I have the ability to receive a client where he or she is, understand what change they want to make, what's really deeply important to them, because that's part of the conversation. What do you want to do? What is it you're looking to shift in your life? Why are we talking? I know how to help facilitate the movement from, a current way of being in the world with these perspectives to a new way of being in the world with maybe these perspectives, or if we're lucky, like, even wider and broader. So my work is to listen lovingly and deeply, understand where the client is and what the client wants, and then use my expertise with development and coaching to guide them through a program series of conversations and practices that'll help them develop the muscles they need to make the change. By muscles, could be emotional muscles, it could be interpersonal, it could be spiritual, it could be moral. There's a lot of different muscles we have as human beings. But I'm not a health coach. I'm not talking about biceps and quadriceps and things. But so the answer is really no. I don't, I'd have a really limited client base if I had to have the same experience as any client that I was going to try to help. I have to have the groundedness to understand where the person is coming from, be with him or her in their coaching topic, and guide them through processes that I know through experience work. Immunity to change being one of them.
Well, I'm glad you came back and made sure you answered the question, because you brought some other important questions through that answer as well. And that is this. Now, I'm going to take it from the perspective that a lot of people may not know what a business coach is. And you talk about personal development as well. And what I mean when I say that is this. Now, when you hear coach, and especially during this time of the year, you have, if you're a basketball fan, you're watching the playoffs and you constantly hear coach this and this. And recently coaches were fired. Several coaches were fired in the NBA. And then analysts, if you watch the sports analysts, they talk about, well, coach didn't make adjustments. And so when you look at coaching from a sports athletic kind of situation, that's what most people identify coaching with. Coaching as a coach, are you telling, as I know you use the word listen, which is key, as a verb, but also are you instructing along the way, or how you're performing your coaching activities? I think kind of define what a coach is and how you are helping a person make the transformational change as well.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's a really important question. So how I'll answer it is that I could tell you how I coach and how some of my colleagues coach. I can't speak for every coach out there because they all have different trainings and different approaches, I think. Um, but I don't tell anybody what to do. I'm not an advice giver. When I coached high school basketball, you did what you were told, or you're on the bench, or you're off the team. So there's somewhat of dictatorship there. And professional, just to carry the analogy forward, professional coaching as we know it now, what I do and what others do, that did grow out of athletics, because people said, wow, if the best people in the world, if Olympic athletes and professional baseball players and basketball players, football players have coaches, wouldn't it make sense for successful business people to be coached as well? So that's where it definitely grew from. But there's a big difference, like professional basketball, which is going on right now, the playoffs, as you said. First of all, it's an entertainment business. There's lots and lots of money involved, and there's money at stake if you win or lose a game or a season or a championship. So it's a really different feel contrasted with what I do. So I'll occasionally ask my client if it's okay if I point something out or teach them something that I think would be really helpful to them. But mostly I listen, I ask questions, they tell me what they want to accomplish. I don't say, well, you should do this. They tell me what they want to accomplish. And then my work is to offer to them, here's what I hear from you, and here are the muscles that I think would best help you get to what it is you accomplish. Again, muscles meaning could be cognitive development, emotional, interpersonal skills, moral reasoning, whatever it happens to be. And moral reasoning, not so much, are you a good person or an evil person, but the moral line of development is the should line. In a given scenario, what should I do? That's a moral decision. What's the pluses and minuses? That's why when I say moral, I'm not talking about, coaching good and evil people. This is a different meaning. Occasionally, as I said, I will offer insight, but I would never pretend to tell a client what to do. Coaching, if you look at the International Coach Federation, they're almost dictatorial about that coaches aren't mentors, they're not consultants, and they're not teachers, although we do a little bit of that if we're really doing a good job. There's a wonderful book, and I'm going to forget the name of it right now, but it basically characterizes the 7 roles that coaches play, and even in the course of one conversation. You're a contractor. You're Doug Silsby, who is deceased, is the author of the book. You're a contractor. You're a teacher. You're a mentor. You're a guide. You're a facilitator. So you play these different roles. But in the type of coaching that I do, I'm rarely, if ever, an advice giver. The closest I would come to that if a client said, well, what would you do in my situation? And I have a long answer to that, which I won't share now. But I would say, basically, if I were in your situation, I'm not saying if you were in your situation, but if I were in your situation, because this is how I look at things, I might do this. And often when somebody asks me a question like that, I say, I have no idea, because hypotheticals have never served me well. They're fun to play with, but I'm not a big guy on hypotheticals. Give me a real situation. Let's work through that together.
Okay. Now, what I also think is important to understand is what I find in alignment with you, which is one of the reasons why I believe that you and I are connected, and then have what I advocate people do with their lives is, 3 things. And that's what my program is designed to do. That's what I advocate as being a part of the movement I'm building. The membership is basically connect, engage, and co-create. And I think that's extremely important. I think that's what a lot of people, when they are building tribes or building relationships with folks, they miss out on one of those 3 things. They connect, obviously, that's the first step. And connect is not just, I just want to make sure I explain to folks, it's not just exchanging contact information, right? That's networking to me. Here's my business card, here's your business card, here's my email address, what's your email address, etc. Where connecting is where you deeply listen and understand, and now based off something aligned, you're now connected with this person, and through that connection of energy and whether it's purpose or alignment of principles, you see that this is someone you want to do something great in your life. So the next step is engagement. So how do you go about being engaged with this connection? And I think that's the next step a lot of folks don't understand. And this is one of the key differences between networking and connecting, is that networking, they teach you to, okay, can you do this for me? Can you send me a referral? Like I've seen a lot of realtors are really known for this. Give you a business card, in the back of the business card, say referral is the kindest way of saying, thank you, or the kindest way of saying they're doing something for me. And it's like, why would I do something for you? I don't even know you. And that's how I've been offended by when someone gives me that or asks me that when I just met you. Where connecting, I think for me, is more about how can I serve you? What can I do to help you, as opposed to you helping me? It's what can I do to help you and provide some kind of value in that context. And engagement leads to both of you all looking for ways to be of value to each other. And that's when you become engaged in that process. And that's when the relationship really begins to grow and really develop and nurture and things of that nature. Then finally, that should lead to co-creating, of taking action on both of y'all's part to say, let's do something together that maybe we're doing individually alone, but now we can do together that can benefit us both. And that's where I want people to really go along that path. Now, with that context, I want to take a step back and go back to how your program works and how you work as a coach, because I think it's important to understand in doing so, how do you, well, let me ask this way, and then I want to come back to this question, because this is a question I left off earlier. And that is, what I see in attraction and alignment with you is that you are also in a process of continual growth, becoming more fully human. Do you believe that if you were not on that journey yourself, could you coach someone else to become fully human, even if you're not looking along those lines or in alignment with that kind of goal? I mean, those intentionalities.
Yeah, so I get that. So that's actually great, because it turns the earlier question around a little bit in terms of becoming more fully human. If I weren't on that same path, I can't imagine how I could help somebody else be on that path. Because I wouldn't know what that goal was like. I could perhaps provide technical help. And going back to that technical versus adaptive change piece, fully human is not a technical move. It's an adaptive move. It's the simplest way I describe it is that my perspectives, my view of things becomes increasingly inclusive, comprehensive, balanced, and complex. And complexity comes along with being fully human. If you're partially human and you see things as right and wrong, good or evil, black and white, that's a pretty simple way to be. If you open yourself up to possibilities and different people and different types of people and different endeavors, that's a much more complex and fully human way to be. And that, I think, to be extravagant, that's what we need now in the world. There's more people becoming more fully human, not locked into a little, box, and they can't see what's out there in their peripherals.
Absolutely. So can you give our listening audience an idea of kind of using a case study, if you don't mind, of how your coaching program works? Like if someone were to be a client of yours, how would it begin, and kind of walk us through some of the coaching techniques or methodologies that you utilize?
Yeah. So again, the primary methodology I use is called integral coaching. And again, it was I was trained for 2 years up in Integral Coaching Canada in Ottawa. And so a basic coaching program would unfold with having a consultation. We get to know each other and see if the prospective client thinks I might be able to help. I get a sense of the client. If we agree to work together, we get the money thing out of the way at the beginning. Here's what it costs. We negotiate if we have to, and then we just do the coaching. The first conversation after the consult is an intake conversation. What do you want? that's not how I ask it, but we get to the heart of what the client wants. And we define that. We call it a coaching topic. It's one sentence usually. I want to be increasingly better able to control my emotions with my direct reports. I'm just making something up there. In fact, let me give one that I can actually speak to. I want to be increasingly better able to delegate work to my direct reports. That's a real one that I've worked with somebody on. And I just ask a lot of questions. I try to get to know the person as fully as I can, what they're really like in a lot of different areas of their life, because then I take a look at them. Do they need emotional control? Do they need to have bigger perspectives? Is it a matter of interpersonal skills? I have a whole dashboard of traits of human beings that I look for. And I need to pick 3 or maybe 4 of those and get a sense of this person. These are the muscles I think that he would need. This happened to be a he. This person would need to develop. I take about 2 weeks and I develop a coaching program for the person. It includes a couple of metaphors, a current way of being metaphor, meaning how the client showed up, and then a new way of being metaphor, which is what the client's going to aspire to. I put that all together in a document, and then we spend another hour and a half or so in the second conversation going through the document piece by piece and revising it so the client is happy with it. Occasionally it's exactly right, no revisions necessary. Usually there's some revisions. So far, nobody has rejected it completely in my career, thank God. And then we just pick a place to start. I always have a sense of what would work, but it's the client's program. So I ask. If they're not sure, sometimes they're not, I'll say, well, here's what I think. Good place to start. And I build practices for them. They agree to do practices. So every 2 weeks, they get a new practice. Sometimes they do it for an extra 2 weeks. Sometimes they do it for less. But generally speaking, they do practices. And they build these muscles that they need, in this case, to be better able to delegate to their direct reports. Now, I'll give you one quick example, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
So this particular client was really a great guy. Like his direct reports loved him, but he wanted to help so much. He would ask them a question, or they would come to him with a question, and he would just dump all of his wisdom and knowledge on them and kind of tell them what to do. And he was aware of that. And he didn't want to keep doing that. That's why he and I were working together. So one of the practices I gave him was the next time next time a direct report comes to you with a question, you can answer the question, just give them the answer and don't say anything else. You have to stop there. If you go to the direct report with something and you have a question for the direct report, ask the question, let them answer it, say thank you, nothing else, walk away. So that was really hard for him because he had all this knowledge he wanted to share, but he did it for 2 weeks. Several things happened. One was one of his direct reports asked him if he was okay. That was the funny part, because he just, he was used to him always saying too much. But what he learned was that his direct reports were way more skilled and competent than he knew. They got a lot of stuff done without him giving, too much information. He got way more comfortable delegating to them because he saw how competent they were. And he learned that he didn't need to have to try to solve every issue himself. And he wasn't the guy that did that because he was a dominating personality. He was just very generous and wanted to help people in the organization. So basically I asked him to shut up. Just say thank you. When somebody gives you an answer, say thank you. That was a practice that really developed, for him, it was mostly an interpersonal skill and a little bit of an emotional skill. Took away the fear of not doing enough. Oh, I didn't help that person enough. Now I feel bad. So we got rid of that. And it just, that's just one of the practices I gave him. I don't remember everything else we did together. But that's one example. We do that over a period of time. And the practices are built to take place during my client's day. So I don't say, find 4 hours and do this, because nobody can do that. Everybody's busy. So we build the practices to take place in their day-to-day life, whether it's at home or at work. It fits right into what they do. And we're basically asking them to, when I would normally do this, that's the current way of being. And I give them a metaphor for that. Do this move. Behave as if you're the new way of being. And that's how they begin to build the muscle. They practice changing behavior. And then last thing I'll say, I know I'm talking a lot here, part of that coaching approach requires observation and reflection as well. So we don't just ask them to make the behavioral change. We ask them to notice what comes up as they do the new behavior, and then reflect in writing what they learned over the 2 weeks. What that does, it includes both awareness and behavior in the coaching. So just behavior change can be nice, but it tends not to last. Just a new awareness can be helpful, but it doesn't automatically change behavior. In this type of coaching, we ask them to change behavior and pay attention to it, and then reflect on that new awareness. Those two together are much more powerful coaching approach than either one can be apart. So I'll take a breath there.
Well, I'm glad you pointed out, because I definitely want to give you an opportunity to talk about your coaching program, because you and I agree that going forth, you're going to be providing me some coaching services. And that's what I really wanted to do for our members, is give them connection to the resources I have. Because again, my goal is to raise $1.5 billion collectively with conscious leaders, that we can actually go out and implement our higher purpose activities. Because again, without social capital, I don't believe you can get financial capital, or it's even more challenging. And then you're forced to do things like pitches to strangers. And I never liked the concept. And I've done it. I've been an investor in an organization or in this program where people would pitch to us in 20 minutes and we would determine whether or not we want to invest capital. I always thought that was really the worst way, because you got to listen to a person who's you got to expect a person, a total stranger, to give you their attention for 20 minutes. But most of us don't give people our attention more than 30 seconds. So yeah, I hope you can keep this person's attention for 20 minutes, say the right words, get this person interested in taking their capital and investing in with you, and believing that you can actually do what you say and give them what they're ready to return, when there's 5 or 6 other people lined up right behind you with the same goal. Right. So for me, I always believe it's the connections. It's getting people to be willing to listen to you and be engaged with you and truly want to help you, because you're helping someone else, or you're helping them to make the world a better place, and you are aligned along those values. And it's not just about he's going to make some money off your ideal, your investment. And so now, with that being said, I've asked you to help coach me, so I believe everybody needs to have a coach. I don't think anyone is successful that I know, that I admire, who hasn't had a coach, or and if they currently are still in business, doesn't have a coach. So now, with that being said, I know that you as an author, you as a business coach with your previous clients, you with your other programs you're doing, you don't have time to just coach everybody you want who wants to hire you as a coach specifically. So I've asked you to kind of really create a special program for the members of the Conscious Business Network Nexus that we're building. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about how your group coaching can work with those individuals who are not going to initially won't get your one-on-one time directly?
Yeah, thanks for that, King. And so I just gave that overview of integral coaching, which is a thing we wouldn't be doing in the group coaching that you and I are talking about. It would be more aligned with 2, maybe 3 different coaching processes. Excuse me. One, we mentioned already, immunity to change, because people can be trained in that and then just use it themselves when they're trying to make a change. I mean, you can't just do it in 1 day or 2 days and learn it and think you're okay with it, but it's something that it's deceptively simple, as I like to say. So that's one of the modalities. Another one is just becoming familiar with what's called the Karpman drama triangle. It's looking at the roles we play. Are we playing a role of victim, or villain, or hero, or coach, or challenger, or creator in our lives at any given moment? We can change those roles in a given conversation with someone. So looking at how we play those roles is another approach. And then something else that I use is voice dialogue, which if anyone has heard of, well, voice dialogue for one, but parts work or in inner family systems, all of them deal with subpersonalities. In other words, we all have these different parts of ourselves that vie for attention. Some of the more common ones are the inner critic, the vulnerable child, the protector. All of us have those, and then we have some unique ones that maybe not everybody has. So those are the type of things that we would be working on in the group coaching that you and I are talking about. Probably leading with immunity to change, and then using the others as appropriate.
Excellent, excellent. Well, it's really getting ready to wrap this session up. I definitely want to thank you for your investment of time. And I definitely appreciate the fact that you're willing to come on board and be one of the coaches that are going to help us help these 900 conscious leaders to bring about transformational change first in their lives. And then eventually they're going to take that change, build their own tribe, and then the tribe then begin to make changes in their communities. And that's how we get people to start really connecting to the power and the energy of love. You talked about listening lovingly earlier. I want folks to realize that love is really the energy we really want to connect with. And we want to put ourselves on the path to all become more fully human. At this stage of my life, I only want to connect with people who are on that journey. So if you're not already intentionally working to be on that journey, I want you to join us for a free webinar where you can really understand the benefits of what it means by getting started on that journey and then being connected to other individuals who are on that journey, and then further beginning to build relationships with folks who are aligned and engaged, people who align with your principles and your purpose in life. And you really begin to see the difference and what that makes in your life. I can't really articulate that in words, the impact that will have on who you are, the difference between being in your own connectionally intelligent tribe as opposed to a forced tribe that you were put in by society. So the last thing I want to do is give you an opportunity, Reggie, to talk about would you say, and I know this is going to be a very complicated answer, but as you answer it quickly, as quickly as you possibly can. What would you say as the process for becoming fully human? What does that look like from a 1, 2, 3, 1 to 10, whatever steps that you see involved in?
Yeah, so this won't be, there's no particular order to this, although there might be a logical order to put it into, but it won't come out from me in that way right now. Some of the components that are absolutely necessary is one is ongoing self-reflection, ongoing honest self-reflection. So in other words, get really clear on your viewpoint and where it comes from. So that's one. Related to that is awareness of your cultural givens, something you and I have spoken about. In other words, we're all given a view of the world when we're born in our first 10 years or so. Our parents, religion, if we have a religion, our local community, teachers, television. When I grew up, it was just television, radio, and a newspaper. Now there's a lot more. But adolescence is designed to begin to challenge what you're given. So it's tied in with what you said earlier about tribes versus networks. Tribe is what you kind of get stuck into through the systems. You're given that. Networks are what you build yourself. So it's related to that, not identical, but related to that. So be aware of your cultural givens, self-reflect, get clear on what's yours and what's somebody else's. So trying to change other people is a hard job. I don't try to change people. I'm a coach. I don't try to change people. I help someone enact change in their own lives because I have some skills around that. But I don't try to change my kid. I don't change my friends. I never tried to change my mom. That would have been impossible. 4'9" Italian. So, the primary change process is right here. Head, heart, gut. Learn how to navigate that in yourself. that's the goal. That's the simplest way to become fully human. Now, there's lots of skill sets and approaches, and one of the best templates for being fully human is what in Buddhism is called the Eightfold Path. And I can just, you don't have to become Buddhist. You don't have to take any vows or wear a robe or anything, but make sure that how you're seeing things is as close to true as possible. So see what's real. Right? Don't have fictions running your life. Do the work to get to the heart of the truth. Have good intentions. You speak, you and I speak a lot about, and you always speak about, intention in everything that we do. Practice right speech, good speech. Don't use harmful speech. You're hanging out with your friends and you joke back and forth, great, but otherwise, don't use words that hurt people. Make sure your actions are making the world a better place. That's right action. Your livelihood, the thing you choose to do for a living. Make sure that that's making the world a better place. Whether or not it makes you money. All right. You can make a lot of money working in a cigarette factory. I don't know if that's a good idea. I'm not criticizing smokers. My father was a lifetime smoker. I wish he hadn't been, but they're just no good for you. Be aware of the quality of the effort you put in. So right effort. What's the appropriate effort in this moment? We want the surgeon to make the incision at the right depth, the right place, on the right patient, and it's right effort. We want the mechanic to not over tighten the bolt and strip the threads. So in right mindfulness, being able to be aware of what's arising in any given moment, being mindful as a human being, and in right concentration, being able to focus. So the Eightfold Path is a great toolkit if you're going to self-reflect, examine your cultural givens, and commit to being more fully human. It's really, that was a big question, King.
I know, and to throw it at the end, but I knew you could handle it. I knew you would give a great answer because, again, we both on those journeys. And that's what I want folks to realize is that this is a journey. This is not some 6-week course designed to just give you some kind of quick jump start. This is a journey that puts you on a path that's going to be for the rest of your life. Growth mindset means that every day you're going to be learning something new that you didn't know before. And how do you adapt to that? How do you incorporate that into your existing values? And do they need to be transformed? That's a question you're going to be asking yourself along this. And you're going to be writing your story. And that's what's important. Yeah. So as we close out, Reggie, why don't you please share with everyone your contact information, how they can get in contact with you?
Yeah, sure. So the two easiest ways, well, the easiest way is just go to reggiemarra.com, and there's phone number and email addresses there. It's just easier to go there rather than try to say them out loud now. And then the second way we can get a look at some of the other work is healingamericasnarratives.com, which is information about the book and kind of like the soul of what I care about. And those are the two best places. But again, reggiemarra.com is the easiest place to find out more. And I'm up on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn if you have a LinkedIn presence as well. But thank you for that invitation, King. I appreciate that as well.
Well, thank you. And as we close the thing out, I want to share with everyone why I believe that building your own connection cousin tribe is the key thing to being successful and what's really needed in our society today. Because right now what we're faced with is a world that we're into this forced tribalism, and we see that every day, and it manifests through the media. And one of the greatest 3 tribes that we're forced into: our race, our sexual orientation right now, and our politics. And we see that dominate the media. And they're telling you that because you're in these tribes, you got to think this way. Certain leaders seem to rise up and tell us because they're part of our tribe, they understand what we're going through, and they're trying to dictate our lives. And I'm telling you, that's not the path for us to grow on. It's more about being a servant leader, connecting to your purpose in life, and looking to build relationships with people who are in line with your principles and values. If that sounds like something you want to be a part of, then join us for our webinar. Let's connect with intent. Let's become servant leaders. And let's look for ways that not only can we make our lives better, but through that process, we help make other people's lives better. I call it doing great by doing good. And I want to thank everyone for listening tonight, and I look forward to building with you all in the future. Until we meet again, that's all I do, all things in love. Thank you.